The two women arrived with suitcases on a Sunday afternoon in April, and Lorraine Voss held the door open. Because her husband needed care she could not provide alone, and because they had references and because they were kind in the specific way that made a tired woman feel, for the first time in months, that she was not entirely on her own. Miriam handled the medications. Her sister Celeste handled the paperwork. They said it was easier this way. They said Arthur shouldn't have to worry about the accounts while he was recovering. Over 18 months, using documents Arthur did not sign and a notary stamp Celeste had no legal authority to use, they transferred his investment portfolio, his retirement accounts, and two properties in his name into entities they controlled. What nobody knew was that in the attic above the second floor, in a locked wooden chest that had belonged to Arthur's father, there was a record of everything Arthur had ever owned, assembled over 40 years by a man who had survived enough to know that records were the only argument that outlasted a lie. In 2022, in San Mateo County, California, a 77-year-old woman whose husband was declining from early-stage dementia had two women install themselves in her home as caregivers and, over 18 months, systematically transfer his investment accounts, retirement funds, and two properties into their own names using forged power of attorney documents. This is her story, with details changed to protect her privacy. Lorraine Voss had lived in the house on Cabrillo Avenue in Burlingame since 1988. She and her husband Arthur had bought it the year he made partner at the medical practice in San Mateo, where he had worked as an internist since 1981. A two-story craftsman with original built-in bookshelves, a formal dining room they used perhaps 4 times a year, and an attic that ran the full length of the house, and which Arthur had used, since approximately 1994, as his personal archive. He was a keeper of records, tax returns going back to 1979, investment statements going back to 1983, property documents, insurance policies, medical licenses, correspondence with colleagues, drafts of the 2 papers he had published in the Journal of Internal Medicine in the 1990s. He stored them in labeled boxes and, for the items he considered most significant, in his father's wooden chest. A heavy oak piece with brass fittings and a mortise lock that had come from Austria in 1952 and which Arthur treated with the respect due an object that had survived transit. Arthur had been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment in the spring of 2021. The neurologist used the word mild carefully and explained that the condition's progression was not predictable. Some patients plateaued, others declined. Arthur was 79, still sharp in conversation, still reading, still insisting on reviewing his own financial statements each month. But he was slower, and he repeated himself. And there were mornings when Lorraine watched him stand in the kitchen doorway, trying to remember why he had come downstairs. And she understood that the word mild was doing a great deal of work. Lorraine was 77 and managing her own health, a replaced hip, controlled hypertension, and the accumulated fatigue of 2 years of providing primary support to a husband whose needs were increasing. Their son Edward lived in Boston and called twice a week and visited quarterly. Their daughter Susan lived in Portland and visited when she could. Neither was available to come full-time. A neighbor suggested a caregiver placement service that had been operating in the peninsula area for several years. Miriam Crane was 44, warm in manner, and presented credentials showing certification as a home health aide and 3 years of experience with dementia patients. She came for an interview in March of 2022 and was attentive to Arthur in a way that was genuine enough to be convincing. She asked him about his practice, listened to his answers, and did not speak about him in the third person while he was in the room, which Lorraine had found, with previous aides, was rarer than it should be. Miriam said her sister Celeste sometimes assisted with administrative tasks for her clients, scheduling, correspondence, document organization, and that having both of them available would give Lorraine more flexibility. Lorraine agreed. They moved in on the Sunday in April. The first months were unremarkable. Miriam managed Arthur's medications reliably and accompanied him to appointments. Celeste handled correspondence, organized the mail, and began by June sitting with Arthur in his study to help him with the financial paperwork that had become difficult for him to navigate alone. She was efficient and quiet, and she asked questions that sounded like clarification but were, In aggregate, a systematic inventory of every account Arthur held, every institution he used, and every document he kept in the study's filing cabinet. In August of 2022, Arthur signed a document that Celeste placed before him on a Tuesday afternoon while Lorraine was at a physical therapy appointment. She told him it was a healthcare directive update. Routine, she said, the kind of thing advisors recommended annually for patients with his diagnosis. It was a durable power of attorney, granting Miriam Crane authority over all financial decisions. Arthur's signature on the document was witnessed by Celeste, who notarized it using a stamp she had ordered from an online supplier using a registration number belonging to a licensed notary in Fresno named David Vargas, who had no knowledge of this use. By October, Miriam had used the power of attorney to open 3 new accounts at financial institutions in San Mateo and Redwood City, consolidating Arthur's investment portfolio, which held $1.4 million across 2 brokerage accounts. Into these new accounts, from which she made a series of transfers to a personal account in her name over the following 8 months. In March of 2023, using the same power of attorney, she initiated the deed transfer of Arthur's 2 rental properties in Daly City, a duplex and a single-family rental that together had a market value of $1.1 million, to an LLC she had formed in Delaware 3 months earlier. The deed transfers were recorded with the San Mateo County Recorder's Office on March 14, 2023. Arthur died on April 29, 2023, from a cardiac event. He was 81. Lorraine was beside him. Edward flew in from Boston for the funeral. On the second day after the service, he sat down with his mother to begin reviewing the estate documents and discovered that the 2 brokerage accounts, which he had known existed from a conversation with his father 2 years earlier, no longer appeared in Arthur's name. He called the institutions directly. Both confirmed the accounts had been closed. Neither could tell him where the funds had gone without a court order. Lorraine listened to Edward on the phone from the kitchen doorway and understood, without being told, what had happened. She went to the attic. Miriam and Celeste were still in the guest room. They had made no indication of leaving. The attic stair pulled down from the ceiling of the upstairs hallway, the same folding mechanism Arthur had replaced in 2001 with a sturdier model after the original began to feel unsafe. Lorraine climbed it slowly using both rails in the late afternoon of a Thursday in May, 2 weeks after Arthur's funeral. The house was quiet. Miriam was in the garden. Celeste had gone out. The attic ran the full length of the house and was lit by 2 bare bulbs on pull strings, one at each end. The floorboards were solid. Arthur had reinforced them in 1996 when he began using the space seriously, and the air smelled of aged paper and cedar from the 2 chests of wool items Lorraine kept along the north wall. Arthur's archive occupied the east end, a wall of metal shelving holding labeled banker's boxes in chronological rows, a flat filing cabinet with a lock he had never shared the combination to, and the wooden chest from his father, positioned against the east wall under the window, its brass fittings dull with age, its mortise lock keyhole filled with decades of dust that had settled into it and which Lorraine cleared with the tip of a pen before inserting the key. The key had been on Arthur's key ring. She had taken the ring from the hospital bag with his personal effects when he was admitted in April and had kept it in the kitchen drawer since his death. She had known the chest existed. She had never opened it. Arthur had said it was his records, his serious records, he called them, and that she would need to go through it only if something went wrong. The mortise lock was stiff. She worked the key twice before the bolt turned and the lid came free. The chest was organized in layers, each separated by a sheet of acid-free archival paper, of the kind available at specialty paper stores, which Lorraine recognized because Arthur had ordered it in bulk and stored the remainder in a box beside the chest. The top layer held a single sealed envelope with both their names on it. She set it aside. Below the envelope, the first layer held a document she recognized, the deed to the Cabrillo Avenue house, original recorded copy, with her name and Arthur's as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Below that, in a clear sleeve, was the deed to the Daly City duplex. Below that, the deed to the single-family rental. Both deeds showed Arthur as sole owner of record. The second layer held financial records. A bound ledger. Arthur had used these since medical school, the kind with marbled covers and sewn bindings, containing entries from 1983 through February of 2023, recording every significant financial transaction Arthur had made in 40 years. Account numbers, institution names, opening balances, annual summaries, notes on investment decisions. The final entry, dated February 12th, 2023, listed both brokerage accounts by number, with balances $847,000 and $561,000. Combined, $1,408,000. The third layer held correspondence, letters from financial institutions, Arthur's CPA, and his attorney. The attorney was a woman named Rachel Goldstein in San Mateo, who had drafted the couple's wills and estate plan in 2019. There was a letter from Rachel, dated January 2023, confirming the terms of Arthur's updated will, in which Lorraine was sole beneficiary. There was also in the same correspondence file a letter Arthur had written and apparently retained a copy of, addressed to Rachel, dated March 2023, which he had signed but which bore a note in the margin in his handwriting. Not sent. Hands not reliable today. Call Rachel. The letter said, I am concerned that documents have been placed before me for signature that I did not fully understand. I am not certain I have signed anything I should not have. Please review my accounts. He had known. He had tried to act on it and had not been able to. Lorraine sat on the attic floor beside the chest and read the letter in the late afternoon light coming through the east window. Then she opened the envelope with both their names on it. It was Arthur's letter to her. 2 pages, written in the same slow hand as the unsent letter, sometime in early 2023. He told her where everything was. He told her he was sorry that his mind had become unreliable enough that he could no longer be certain he had not been manipulated. He told her that Rachel Goldstein had all of the estate documents, and that Lorraine should call her first, before anyone else, if anything seemed wrong. He wrote, near the end, if Miriam or Celeste have done what I think they may have done, the ledger will show the before. Find someone who can show the court the after. The difference is the theft. Lorraine replaced everything in the chest, locked it, and carried the ledger and both letters downstairs. She did not go through the common areas where Miriam might see her. She went directly to the bedroom, closed the door, and called Rachel Goldstein. Rachel Goldstein had drafted estate plans for Arthur and Lorraine in 2019 and had spoken with Arthur by phone in January of 2023 about updating the will. She had not received the March letter. It had never been sent, and she had not known about the power of attorney. When Lorraine read her the relevant portions of Arthur's unsent letter, Rachel said, stay on the line. She put Lorraine on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, she said she was referring the matter immediately to a colleague who handled elder financial abuse litigation, a man named Thomas Bauer who practiced from an office in Palo Alto. She said Lorraine should say nothing to Miriam or Celeste, ask them nothing, and not allow them to remove anything from the house. She said, can you do that tonight? Lorraine said yes. Thomas Bauer met with Lorraine the following morning, with Edward present by video from Boston. Bauer reviewed the ledger, the deed documents, and the power of attorney, which Lorraine had located in Arthur's study filing cabinet, the copy Celeste had left there after the August signing. He identified 3 specific legal failures in the document's execution that he said made it void under California law. The first failure was the notarization. California Probate Code, Section 4121, requires that a durable power of attorney be signed before a notary public who is present in person and confirms the signer's identity and voluntary consent. Celeste had notarized the document using a stolen registration number. The Fresno notary, David Vargas, had never been present. His commission had been used without his knowledge. Bauer filed a complaint with the California Secretary of State's Notary Division within 24 hours. Vargas was contacted and confirmed in writing that he had no knowledge of the Voss document. The notarization was fraudulent on its face. The second failure was the witness requirement. California law requires that a power of attorney granting authority over property to a care custodian, which Miriam, as a paid caregiver living in the home, legally qualified as, must be signed before two independent witnesses, neither of whom can be the agent named in the document. Celeste had served as the sole witness. She was the agent's sister. Neither condition of independence had been met. The third failure was the capacity question. Arthur's neurologist, whom Bauer contacted with Lorraine's authorization under the estate, provided records showing that Arthur's cognitive assessment scores in August of 2022, the month the document was signed, placed him in the moderate impairment range on the clinical scale used by the practice. The neurologist stated in a written declaration that a patient with those scores would have had significantly diminished capacity to understand the nature and consequences of a legal document conveying unlimited financial authority. The document had been signed by a man who had not, in the neurologist's clinical opinion, been capable of meaningfully consenting to it. Bauer filed an emergency motion in San Mateo County Superior Court in May of 2023, seeking an immediate injunction freezing all assets transferred under the fraudulent power of attorney and a L.I.S. pendens against both Daly City properties. The injunction was granted within 48 hours. The LLC that held the Daly City properties was frozen. The financial accounts Miriam had opened were flagged by the court order. Miriam and Celeste, who had still been in the guest room, left the Cabrillo Avenue house on the same evening the injunction was served. They took their suitcases. They left the key. The confrontation came in July, at a preliminary hearing, before Judge Maria Suarez in San Mateo County Superior Court. Miriam's attorney, a criminal defense lawyer from San Francisco, who had been retained, Bauer noted, within days of the injunction, suggesting resources had been prepared in advance, argued that the power of attorney was valid, that Arthur had signed it knowingly, and that the transfers had been made in good faith as part of legitimate financial management. Bauer presented the neurologist's declaration, the false notarization evidence, the ledger entries showing the accounts before the transfers, and the bank records showing the accounts after. 247 individual transactions structured below reporting thresholds, transferred to accounts in Miriam's name across a period of 11 months. He said the court was looking at a premeditated financial crime against a cognitively impaired man, executed by women who had been given access to his home and his trust, and who had used both to complete a systematic theft. He said the good faith argument required the court to believe that a caregiver and her sister had coincidentally moved $1.4 million and two properties out of a dementia patient's name without noticing. He said he did not believe the court would find that persuasive. Judge Suarez did not. The civil judgment was entered in October of 2023. The court found Miriam and Celeste jointly liable for $2.6 million in compensatory damages, representing the full value of the transferred investment accounts and the Daly City properties at the time of transfer, and ordered an additional $780,000 in punitive damages under California's elder abuse statute. The corrective deeds for both Daly City properties were recorded with the San Mateo County Recorder on November 3, 2023. The California District Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against both women in December: elder financial abuse under Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 15,656, grand theft in the first degree, forgery, and fraudulent use of a notarial seal. Celeste faced an additional charge for the stolen notary registration. Both women were arrested in January of 2024. Miriam's trial was scheduled for the fall of 2024. Celeste accepted a plea agreement in March of 2024 and was sentenced to 4 years. Asset recovery, conducted through seized accounts, and the forced liquidation of assets Miriam had purchased using the transferred funds, a condominium in Foster City, a late model vehicle, and investment accounts in her name, totaled $1.9 million. The Daly City properties, retitled to the estate, resumed rental income immediately. Total recovery against the $2.6 million loss was 73%, which Bauer told Lorraine was exceptional. She said, "Arthur's ledger did the work." Bauer said yes, it did. The estate settled on February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day, which was not planned, but which Lorraine noticed and which she found, in a way she did not try to explain to Edward or Susan, appropriate. The total estate, after recovery and legal costs, was distributed to Lorraine as sole beneficiary per Arthur's 2019 will. The Cabrillo Avenue house, the two Daly City properties, and liquid assets totaling $1.87 million. Rachel Goldstein prepared the final accounting. Thomas Bauer attended the signing. Lorraine signed with the pen Arthur had used to sign their wills in 2019, which she had kept in the kitchen drawer and brought specifically for the occasion. She did not sell the Cabrillo Avenue house. She had considered it in the months when the litigation was ongoing, and the guest room felt even empty, like a room she did not want to pass. But the built-in bookshelves were Arthur's bookshelves, and the dining room table was the table they had eaten 35 years of meals at, and the lemon tree in the backyard, a coincidence she had not planted but had kept, was productive every July, and she decided that the house was hers in a way that preceded and survived everything that had happened in it, and that leaving was the wrong answer. The guest room was repainted in March. She chose a color called pale eucalyptus that the woman at the paint store said was calming, and which Lorraine chose because it was nothing like the color it had been before. She moved a bookcase in and her sewing table and a chair from the living room that she had always liked but never had a good place for. It was a different room now. That was sufficient. In the fall of 2024, Lorraine contacted the Peninsula Volunteers Elder Services Program in San Mateo County and spent 2 afternoons with their Elder Abuse Prevention Coordinator, describing the precise sequence of decisions that had made the fraud possible. The placement service that had not conducted thorough background checks, the power of attorney signed without independent legal review, the filing cabinet Arthur had kept in his study, where a person sitting with him daily could read every document it held, and the months she had spent not knowing something was wrong, because the people doing it had been, in every visible way, helpful. The coordinator said those 4 points mapped exactly onto the gaps their program was trying to address. Lorraine said she knew. She said that was why she was there. Edward visited in December, and they spent the weekend going through the attic together. The first time Lorraine had been up there since the morning she found the chest. Arthur's archive was intact. They went through it box by box, setting aside what the estate required, donating the medical literature to the hospital in San Mateo, where Arthur had privileges for 30 years, keeping the personal correspondence and the 2 published journal papers and the photographs from the decades before digital cameras made photographs less intentional. The wooden chest they moved to the bedroom, where it sat at the foot of the bed as a piece of furniture, because it was a well-made thing and there was no reason to put it in storage. Arthur's ledger, the marbled cover-bound book with entries from 1983 through February 2023, was in the same drawer as his pen. Lorraine had not put it back in the chest. She looked at it sometimes without opening it, the way you look at evidence of a life that was careful and long and documented in its own hand. The last entry was dated February 12th, 2023, 11 weeks before he died. The balance was recorded in his slowing handwriting, each digit formed with the deliberateness of a man who understood that precision mattered and who had kept that understanding even when the rest was going. She thought that was the right thing to remember about him, not the end of the handwriting, the 40 years before it.